Welcome to the Retirement Guy Podcast with Gary Alden from the Kingwood Investment Group. In this podcast, we educate people in or near retirement so they can make informed decisions and bridge the confidence gap. Learn how to mitigate risk in retirement so you don't run out of money before you run out of you. Join Gary Alden and explore strategies on how to live a stress-free retirement.
Hello and welcome to the Retirement Guy with Gary Alden from Kingwood Investment Group. Today we're talking about saving for college using 529 plans. Good afternoon, Gary. How are you?
We are terrific, but as usual, I hope to get better.
Hoping to get better. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know a whole lot about 529 plans, and we're going to get into that here in just a little bit. But as usual, I love it when you start off with trivia. You got one for me today?
Yes, I do. And so far, everybody I've asked has not known the answer to this trivia question, but knowing you, Eric, being all-knowing, all-omniscient,
to me?
you probably know this answer to this 10 times over, but here's the question. What kind of person shall not be honored on a U.S. postal stamp according to the U.S. Postal Service and the Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee? What kind of person shall not be honored on a U.S. postal stamp according to the U.S. Postal Service and the Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee? So that's the question. And if you know the answer, just hold it to the end.
Okay. I don't know it, but I'll wait to the end and maybe I'll throw my guess out then. I think I'm wrong. So we'll go from there. So let's talk about something you know a lot about, and I'm going to learn a lot about 529 plans.
529 plans. Well, they've been around actually for a long time, and there's two basic types. Well, number one, a 529 plan, it's a tax advantage savings plan designed to help, parents, grandparents, whoever, save for their children's, grandchildren's college. And they were originally designed to pay for post-secondary education costs. And it was expanded here a couple of years ago. Now with limitations, you can take money out of 529 accounts to pay for K through 12 education. Mm-hmm. Now, there's two basic kinds of 529 plans. And by the way, all 50 states, including the District of Columbia, offer at least one of these two types of plans.
Okay.
So all 50 states plus the District of Columbia, they all offer at least one or both of these type plans. One, which we have here in Texas, is you can go directly to the state of Texas and do what's called a prepaid tuition plan. And that's where you're buying a certain number of, hours going to college, and you prepay it at today's rates. Maybe you have a brand new newborn child or, 6 months old, and you want them to go to a school here in Texas, and you can prepay today, and that's going to be very, very discounted. Prepay for college today, even though they're not going to college for, 18 or 19 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The second one are called what we normally call 529 plans. That is a savings plan where you put money into a plan, and it's an ongoing plan. Maybe you put $50 a month, $100 a month, whatever it happens to be, or lump sums into a plan to pay for college down the road. And that could be, any college, any place in the United States, or there is a wrinkle. A lot of people think 529 plans are only for colleges in the U.S., and that's probably where most kids are going to go to college, but they can be used for college tuition costs, et cetera, for outside the United States, as long as it's a recognized institution in that particular country.
Okay, so let me just recap. You said there was two types, but are you saying there's two types of 529 plans or just two types of plans that most states have? One of them happens to be
two types of 529 plans. One is prepaid tuition,
and
the other one is the traditional 529 savings plans.
Got it. Okay.
Then there's also a wrinkle in there. It doesn't have to be for college. We call it for college, but it could be used at a recognized trade school. So let's say your son doesn't want to go to college. He wants to be an electrician or a plumber, might even make more money. They could also use it for that as long as it's recognized. And, of course, before you do any of these, you want to make sure the institution you're talking about giving money to is recognized by the government as being a recognized institution that you can use 529 plans money for. Because, again, The big reason for putting money into a 529 account, you're putting money into it, but it grows tax deferred like an IRA account does. Mm-hmm. And then when you take the money, as long as it's for a qualified expense, it's tax-free income. It's not taxed. So that's a good thing.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely.
So terrific savings vehicles. And really why we're doing this particular podcast on this subject today is between the last time we recorded a podcast and today, I had two different of my clients call me up and they said, hey, Gary, we'd like to open some 529 savings plans for our grandchildren.
Nice.
So being nice grandparents. And we've had several people do that over the years. Here's some data, and this is scary to all parents out there. These are numbers from about a year old from the National Center for Education Statistics. And it said the average cost of tuition in the United States for a private nonprofit college was just a hair over $50,000 a year, and that's average.
Good grief.
Then for a private for-profit college, it was a little over $30,000 a year. And then a public school, that's where I went. I went to the University of Texas system years and years ago. It's over $20,000 a year, and that's the national average for just a state school.
Wow.
And let's say your child goes to college for 4 years. There's $80,000, $90,000 just at a state school. You better start saving in a hurry or get grandparents contributing, the parents contributing, the next door neighbors. It's a lot of money. And then what if you have 3 or 4 kids? It gets real expensive. I know when I went to college, my 4 years, I don't think it cost me $20,000 for all 4 years combined.
Mm. Yeah,
it's a lot of money out there.
Yeah, that prepaid thing sounds pretty good.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of 529 plans offered. Like we said, most states offer a 529 savings plans. Not all. There are a few exceptions, but most of them do. Now, as a consumer, you can really choose any 529 plan of any state that you want to. So you could, if you live in Texas, I could use the Texas plan. I could use the California plan, the Virginia plan, the Michigan plan. Doesn't really make any difference. I can pick which plan I like better. But there is one time that you may want to consider using your own state. A lot of states, I'll give you a real live example. One of my clients lived here in Texas for years. They had 2 children, and they had been putting money into a 529 plan. Then he got transferred to the state of Oregon. Oregon has a state income tax. But what Oregon says, if you contribute money into the Oregon 529 savings plan, they will give you a deduction off your state income tax. Mm. So that's kind of a no-brainer. So once he moved to Oregon, and he, like I said, he was already doing a 529 plan, I called up Penny's wife and I said, do you want to stop contributing to that old 529 plan? You want to start contributing to the Oregon 529 plan because it's going to save you money on taxes.
And can they just switch it over?
Yeah, I think he can switch the balance from 529 to 529. But even if you couldn't, you could just leave the other one dormant.
Got it. Okay.
And start up a new one in the other state.
All right.
Obviously, when you do one of these 529 plans, what you can purchase inside of them, it's dictated by the government. When 529 plans were first started out, you could only buy mutual funds in a 529 plan. They've now expanded that. In addition to traditional mutual funds, you can buy now what's called an ETF or an exchange traded fund if that particular plan offers it. And normally the advantage of an ETF is they normally have a lower cost expense ratio than a traditional mutual fund. So some 529 plans offer ETFs, some don't. And of course, it's up to you to go do your due diligence. Here in Texas, since we don't have any income tax, so we're not going to get a tax break there, really, when you go do your due diligence out there, you could do any 529 plan in the country and kind of pick the one that you like the best.
Sounds good.
So there are fees and expenses. These states are not doing it for free. So it is important that you check out the fees and expenses associated with whichever 529 plan you're looking at. But because obviously if they charge a fee, that fee is going to lower your potential return. And it's given very, by plan. So, do your due diligence and see what plans are charging. again, we've already covered, again, as long as you're using it for a qualified educational expense, the federal government's not going to tax you. And we've already covered the tax break you might get from states that charge or that you have income taxes on. Now, contributions. All 529 plans have a limit, a lifetime limit on what you can put in. Now, the federal government right now, Eric, you can give each one of your children $15,000 a year tax-free as a gift.
Yep.
And your wife could give $15,000 to each child. Well, in a 529 plan, the same rules work, except they let you accelerate it. So let's just say, my son's 1 year old, and I want to supercharge the 529 plan. Instead of just giving $15,000, say, to seed that plan, I could give 5 years worth. In other words, 5 times 15 is $75,000. I could put $75,000 into a 529 plan day one for a child.
Wow.
And then my wife could do the same thing. So we literally could have a 529 account and load $150,000 into that thing day one.
That's pretty good.
Now, the issue is most parents don't have $150,000 laying around.
Yeah, true.
When the child, but hey, maybe there's grandma and grandpa out there who can help fund some of these things. And I've seen some of grandparents really put some hefty dollars into these things. So you can really put in the quicker, obviously, you can put money in, the quicker it can grow and compound, and you have more years for growth.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to get to this in a few minutes, but one of my clients years and years ago when 529 plans first came out, this gentleman called me up and he says, Gary, he said, I want to put a bunch of money into this 529 plan. So he maxed it out, and we looked at the school the child was probably going to go to. And I told him, I said, you probably overfunded this. You put more money into this 529 plan that is probably ever going to cost the child to go to college. And he told me, he says, I know. He says, but I want to tax defer this money. And I told him, I said, because, again, when you set up a 529 plan, let's say you're the parent, you're in effect the owner of the plan, and the child's the beneficiary. He said, well, I'll be the owner, child can be the beneficiary. But if there's any money left over, he said, I could just use it for my own benefit. And I said, yeah, you will, but you're going to pay taxes plus a 10% penalty because it's not being used for higher education. And he says, yeah, I'm aware of that. But he says, I've worked out a math on a piece of paper, and even paying taxes and even paying the 10% penalty, if I can leave that money tax deferred for 18, 20 years, I'll be ahead of the game. So that's just, I've only ever had one person do that, but that was his modus operandi for putting in a bunch of money up front. Now, one of the questions, again, that I had last week from one of my grandparents was, on funding a 529 plan, is how does a 529 plan potentially impact financial aid? Now, it's going to vary by state on, in the institution you're working with. But when you put money in a 529 plan, you also need to consider how having money in your 529 plan could affect potential college aid for your child in the future. So for many families, a larger part of a financial aid package may be, also in loans. But so the more you can save for college, like we mentioned a minute or so ago, the less debt your child is going to have to hopefully incur. Again, anybody can set up a 529 plan. I've only seen this happen twice in the 25 years I've been an advisor. But I've seen 2 people set up for 529 plans for people who weren't even related to them. They were just being nice, helping out a family, friend's child. I've got a client who's doing that here in Kingwood, and then years and years ago, had a client set up a couple of 529 plans, again, for just kids of families that she knew, and she knew the families were never going to be able to save money for the child's college, and she was just being a nice lady.
Nice.
And she had, very, very nice lady. She's retired over in Georgia now, but just super nice lady, thinking about other people.
So let me ask you a question on that specifically, Gary. If who becomes a beneficiary, heaven forbid something happens to that child, or if they decide they're not going to school?
Well, you got a good point there, because you start putting away money for your child's college today, and when they get ready to go for college, what if they had a full scholarship to college? Well, now you don't need that money. What if they could care less about going to college? You have that too. Not everybody's cut up for college.
Or they want to go military, which is great.
They want to join the Army, join the Navy, Air Force. So there's several things you can do. One, you can transfer. So let's say you have a brand new newborn, and when they get ready for college, they don't need the money for one reason or another. You can then transfer that money down to one of their siblings.
All right.
So Junior doesn't need the money. We can transfer it to his little sister, his little brother. Now, you could say run out of options and, hey, all the kids get scholarships, or they all want to, just join the Army. The money could be used by the parents for educational expenses, and there's no charge for that. It can also be given to a first cousin. So if you realize, hey, my sister's child over in Amarillo, I could say I could fund my niece or nephew's college. But for some reason, you cannot do a second cousin. Because I literally had that question come up in the last probably 6 to 12 months. Somebody asked me about a second cousin and double-checked it, even called the 529 plan. The law does not allow second cousins, but it can be transferred to a first cousin.
Okay, so
it can be transferred to all kinds of people, but it's all mostly immediate family.
All right. So again, I'm going to go back. I'm really testing you here, Gary. Let's say you're a family friend or really close, or maybe you're a godparent, right? And there's no blood relation there, and you want to start something, and we've kind of seen those couples that get together, and you're like, I don't know, I really hope it works for them, but maybe it won't, So you're starting a 529 plan for that child to give them the best possible scenario or future. How can you make sure that if let's say that child decides to go military, that money isn't just taken by the parents, or if the parents had divorced by that time, that it's not going to be a battle to see who gets that money and all that? Is there any way, do you have any control if you're not a blood relative and you want to bless somebody with a 529?
Well, whoever sets up the 520, let's say you set up a 529 plan, you have control forever.
Okay, so you
don't give control to the other parents. You control. Now, the one thing you want to do in there is name a successor to the plan ownership. So, if something happened to you, say your wife, your brother, your first, it could be your next door, it could be your half step neighbor.
Got it.
Whoever you name in that document can take over and decide where that money's going to go. So the parents of the other child could never control it unless you gave them control.
Got it. I think that's something that would be on people's minds because, again, we don't want any marriage to end in divorce, but I think the rate right now is a little over 50% due, and that can be such a battle. And I know that somebody's heart that's giving to a child really wants that child to take advantage of it and be able to use it and not fall into nefarious hands, I guess is the way I'm looking at it. So that's good to know. There
you go. So we did mention, as long as you spend the money when it comes out for a qualified higher education expense, there's no taxation on that money. The question is, per the IRS, what is a qualified educational expense? It's really kind of most of the things you can think of. It is going to cover tuition, room and board, books, and for years, that's all it would cover, room and board, tuition, and books. They have finally expanded coverage. It now covers computers. And, a lot of schools now, you don't even get books. You get a computer, and your books are all on a computer. So if you buy a computer, that is a legitimate expense. But one thing that parents always get upset about is the purchase of a car to go to college is not covered. Now, you could take the money out of a 529 plan to buy a car. You can certainly take it out. But the money you're using to pay for that car, you're going to pay taxes on that money, and you're going to pay a 10% penalty on that money. So you can always use it for a non-educational expense, but since it's not a qualified expense, they're going to tax you and then a 10% penalty on top of the normal taxes.
Now, when you say room and board, does board include a food plan? Because I know that's a pretty big expense. Okay, good. I just want to make sure that fell under that category.
They won't cover cell phones, but I'll bet you one of these days they'll even cover cell phones. Like I said, for years they wouldn't even cover a laptop.
Mm-hmm.
But currently, cell phones are not covered as a legitimate expense. But again, the biggest question I get from folks is transportation, or just say flying home at Christmas for a Christmas vacation, flying back home from the college. That's not covered. Transportation currently is not covered of any kind. Airplanes, cars, whatever.
Got it.
The other question, this is a real niche in the law, and one of my clients did this. She is paying for several grandchildren's college. She had just been, little Susie's going off to college. My client, she has a lot of money. She just was paying for college out of her pocket, and then later on says, hey, I'll get reimbursement. Well, she waited 2 years to, quote, reimburse herself. So I called the 529 plan, and I said, hey, told them what I just told you. Client paid for all the educational expenses for her grandchild. Now she wants to be reimbursed from the 529 plan. There's plenty of money in there. But she's waited 2 years. And the 529 plan told me the IRS says, yeah, you can pay for it out of your pocket. Then you can reimburse yourself from the 529 plan as the parent, but you've got to do it within 12 months.
Oh, boy.
And in my case, the client waited 24 months.
Yikes.
So I said, that's between you and the IRS what you do, but I'm just telling you what the law is. So, if you need, and literally this week we have sent out distributions on 2 529 plans because, hey, this is the time of year people start asking for money because, hey, college starts here in about a month or so.
Exactly. We're getting down to crunch time.
Well, that gets down now to how do you get the money out of the plan? And again, I'm giving you some generalities here, I work with 3 529 plans that I like real well and I understand them and I know how they work. So one, we could just have the 529 plan send a check directly out of the plan right to the school. Now that may seem like the easiest option that you might want to do, but it could create some problems. Here's why. The school that you're sending the check to, and you had the check made payable to the school, they may opt to adjust the student's financial aid package and reduce it dollar for dollar by the money coming out of the 529 plan.
Wow.
And I have seen that happen. So you thought you were getting this, financial aid package, and then all of a sudden you send in $10,000 from the 529 plan and they reduce your financial aid package by $10,000.
Jeez, that's terrible.
That's not good.
I don't even know
that can happen.
I didn't think that was even legal.
Yeah, well, they do all kinds of stuff out there. So again, your financial aid package could very well be trimmed down, and it might be trimmed down, too much.
So what's the answer? Don't send it straight to them?
The second thing is, to kind of avoid that, you could send a check yourself. In other words, take the money out of the 529 plan, put it in your checking account, then write the check from yourself to, pay tuition, room and board. But it now puts you on the hook for making sure your students' expenses, are paid. If you take it out now, you've got to pay it yourself. But you also must report that distribution on your tax return. You have to file, if I remember right, it's a 1099-Q. 1099-Q is sticking in my brain. I'm pretty sure that's the right number. Now, this key word in here is might trigger taxes and penalties on the distribution, even when the funds have been used for qualified education expenses. That's when you really want to get down, maybe talk to your CPA, your tax expert who's helping you with taxes, and make sure you're doing all that right. Now, let me tell you the easiest, best way to do it. You send, if you trust the child, you give the child the money, have them put it in their checking account, and you have the child pay the college from the child's checking account.
Oh, boy.
Now, then you run into an issue. If the child says, hey, Mom and Dad just gave me $20,000 here. I'm going to go have a party.
Yeah.
And then they decide to, go play hooky and never go to college. So you've got to make a big assumption here that the student who you're giving the money to is going to be responsible for using those funds to pay for qualified education expenses. and not throwing a party for all their friends Saturday night and having a beer bust.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So those are the 3 ways of doing it. Again, have the fund send the check directly to the institution, have the fund send the check to you, and then you write a personal check to the institution, or giving the money directly to the child and let the child send or pay for the educational expense out of their personal checking account. And I still kind of like that. And then you threaten the child with death if they don't pay the college.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I'm one of those parents, I'm talking about 529 plans, and I'm one of those people that did not ever do a 529 plan. So, and at one time, because we have the Brady Bunch at my family, right. We have Linda's 3, my 3, so 6 kids. And at one time, we had 4 of the 6 in college at the same time because there's a set of twins in there.
Oh, yeah. Ouch.
And they're all similar ages, too. So I can guarantee you that Gary and Linda Alden, several years ago, actually quite a few years ago now, we had no money left over every month. And, I dreaded the fall and the spring every year because here went immense amount of money out of my checking account to pay for college, and about all was left was a moth.
That's not much to eat either.
The only thing good I got about it was I would always log on to the college's website and pay by my credit card so I could get points.
Oh, there you go.
And then here comes the credit card bill, 30 days later, and then I write a check to pay off the credit card, and then there's no money left in my bank account. So please do not follow my example. Take advantage of 529 accounts, and, hey, tax deferred growth, just like an IRA. And then when you take out the money, it's kind of like a Roth IRA. You're not paying taxes on the distribution. I mean, it is a win-win. But again, the secret in all is to start early.
Now,
and even if you can just do $50 a month, you get in the habit, then you can up it to $100 a month. And then one thing, actually, one of the ladies who works for me, when her little boy, he turns 14 this year. And she's been doing this for several years. She's been telling, hey, grandparents, aunt, uncles, whoever said, hey, you can give the kid, a toy or something, but if you want to, just write a check. Made payable to the 529 plan for, $25 or something. And, we'll just collect all the checks and then send them all into the 529 plan, which brings up another point. It doesn't just have to be the parents putting in. It could be aunt, uncle, grandma, next door neighbor.
Yeah.
And they can put it, they can put money into the plan instead of giving the kid a toy that's going to break in, 2 days. Hey, here's $25 for college.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right, Gary, we are running out of time. Is there anything else we need to say about this specifically today about 529s?
No, that we timed this out perfectly. That was my last topic.
All right. Now on to the trivia.
Okay, trivia question. What kind of person shall not be honored on a U.S. postage stamp according to the U.S. Postal Service and the Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee? The answer is, drum roll please.
I think it's somebody who's living, right?
It's a living person.
Yes. I kept thinking who has been honored, and I can't remember anybody who's currently living that's on a stamp. So that was my guess. And I got it right.
I actually asked this question of my sister yesterday. I have a sister in Amarillo, and I asked her the same question, and she says, oh, well, that kind of answers my question. She said, I just put a stamp on a letter, and it has a picture of Sally Ride on there. And she said, well, you answered my question. Sally Ride must be dead or she couldn't be on a stamp. And I went, you're correct.
That is correct. Sorry, Sally.
There you go.
All right, Gary, thank you so much for your time today. This was very informative. If people have these questions and they want to reach out, give them the number, please, would you?
It's 281-359-7900, 281-359-7900.
Perfect. And thank you all for listening to the Retirement Guy podcast with Gary Alden. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Gary comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. For those of you who are listening that have friends and family that have young children that could start this plan now and make a huge difference later, share it with them, please. It'll be very important to them. Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at Kingwood Investment Group, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Retirement Guy podcast. Click the subscription button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Kingwood Investment Group. The content has been made available for information and education purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions that you may have regarding your investment planning. Kingwood Investment Group is independent of Next Financial Group, Inc. Securities and investment advisory services offered through Next Financial Group, Inc., member FINRA/SIPC.